Welcome to Hope One Live, ladies and gentlemen. You know, there's a man that has brought hope to millions over the years, the great C.S. Lewis. And I have a man on this program today who you are going to love. I've known Max McLean for just a few years now, and he's one of my favorite people. He has played C.S. Lewis and written plays about C.S. Lewis and done this all over the world. In fact, he's been doing a play called The Most Reluctant Convert, not only in theaters all over the country, but actually at universities all over the country. And to get a sense of how the students respond to The Most Reluctant Convert play, where Max McLean plays C.S. Lewis, I want to show you a very short video from the University of Pennsylvania. Here it is.
I mean, it was packed, like it was absolutely sold out.
There was like emotion, visceral reactions like occurring in the crowd, and I think that was something that's very telltale of like what's going on amongst us.
The audience was so engaged. We were laughing, we were drawn in.
I knew that C.S. Lewis was an atheist and that he came to faith later in life. I didn't know how much he was fighting against his conversion the entire time.
When we set out, I did not believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. When we reached the zoo, I did.
Oh, it was beautiful. I empathize with his story a lot.
To see how it was portrayed on stage and just to see his mannerisms and his huge dynamic personality play out. And it was just such a wonderful experience.
Now that's the kind of work Max McLean is doing and has been doing for quite a while. He is also, you've heard Max McLean, even if you've never heard the name, because Max has been the voice of the Bible. He's narrated the Bible in several translations. He's a wonderful guy. He's coming to us from Manhattan, from New York City. Here he is, the great Max McLean. Max, how are you this morning?
Oh, I'm great. Good to be with you, Frank. Good to be on your program.
It's always great to be with you, sir. I've been to several of your plays. You've graced one of our fundraising events, and we went to one of your plays for that fundraising event. Everybody loved it. But I got to ask you, before we get into the Fellowship for Performing Arts, which is the ministry that you run and a star in, I got to ask you, what is it like to be living in a 2-bedroom apartment in New York City right now?
Okay, yeah. Well, before I talk about that, I would be remiss if I didn't mention your book, Stealing from God. What a tremendous resource that is, Frank. And it's got this in the trenches feel, which of course that's what you do. So I just wanted to mention that right at the top.
Thank you.
And you asked about being in New York. Well, for Sharon and my wife, this is day 53 of our lockdown in New York. I spend 23 hours a day in this small apartment, 2-bedroom apartment overlooking the city. And then I walk around the city for a little about an hour or so, which is just desolate. So it's just me, the homeless, and the police. And since I'm not wearing a uniform, they mistake me for homeless.
All right. Now, are you walking around in a mask and all that, or?
Yeah, I do. I walk around in a mask. I mean, it's really easy to social distance. All I will say, yesterday, I did notice quite a bit more automobile traffic than I have noticed since the middle of March. I was a little bit surprised by that. So there's something stirring here.
Well, let's go back to the beginning for you. How were you brought up, and how did you become a Christian?
Yeah,
were you brought up in a Christian home or not?
I was born in Panama to a single parent who married an American GI, brought us to the United States, New York City via Statue of Liberty, New York Harbor when I was 4 years old. The first thing I had to do was master the English language, and I've been working on it ever since. My dad was in the military, so we traveled all over the country and various places around the world, Okinawa, Germany, went to 10 different schools from first grade to 12th grade. Wow. So, just you had to make your mark, and I made my mark in athletics. It was about how do I fit in? How do I stand out? So that was that. I was confirmed a Catholic when I was very young. I took it very seriously. I was really moved by it, quite frankly. But then it sort of dissipated, and by the time I got to college, I would have, in my freshman year, I remember calling myself an atheist. Not sure if I really knew what it meant. It was just that I didn't want to be bothered. But later on, was sort of attracted to Eastern mysticism, but pretty much a secular pagan. I mean, the thing that I liked about Eastern mysticism, at least the way I perceived it, was there was nothing to believe, nothing to obey, except what was either exciting or comforting. Mm-hmm. And so I could sort of pick and choose. But I certainly had a hole in my heart that the Lord filled right after college.
Now, is it true that you just read the Gospel of John and were amazed by it? What was your conversion experience? I thought I may have heard you say that.
Yeah, well, what the instrumental cause was I met a young woman who was a Christian, and I would go to church with her on Sundays if I wanted to be with her, which I did. I found church really, I didn't get it, but I was moved by, the liturgy I didn't understand, and the singing I didn't understand, but I was really moved by the Lord's Prayer because, of course, that was part of our catechism, but it hit me pretty hard. And so I think that brought me back to that earlier period, saying that with a lot of other people in church. So, and then I started meeting some of Sharon's friends, and one thing that really popped, I started acting in my senior year of college, but prior to that, I was a history major, and I graduated as a history major and minored in dramatic arts at the University of Texas. But some of Sharon, I met some of Sharon's friends. That was the girl I was interested in, and she mentioned to me that some of these friends mentioned, found out I had a history degree and said, well, Jesus was a person in history, just like Lincoln, just like George Washington. Uh-huh. Well, that was news to me because I thought Jesus was fairy tales. Right. And that hit a synapse in my brain that, you never know what the Lord uses, but I was it was a paradigm shift. Uh-huh. And so I, not too long after that, someone encouraged me to read John's Gospel. Now, I tried to read the Bible before, but, I didn't get very far.
You ran into the book of Leviticus, didn't you?
Yeah, that's probably true. I thought Genesis was really interesting. Uh-huh. I thought Exodus was great until they started building the temple. But I tell you what's really interesting, what comes back, and I'll finish the story, but there's something about Pharaoh's magicians that really grabbed my attention back then. And I keep thinking about that a lot now is, they could imitate God's miracles, but he would swallow them up. And I see a lot of that happening right now. But anyway, so I read John's Gospel in one sitting. It took a little over 2 hours. And I thought Jesus was going to come out of the pages. I was so smitten. He was so heroic and imperturbable. He just had, this kind of, I just saw this John Wayne movie recently. He had a little bit of that, this strong guy that all the stuff around him, it was a story. It wasn't a prescription. It wasn't, okay, read this to understand this. It was just how this person reacted to the turmoil around him.
Right.
And I was so taken with the story, the heroic story that the gospel is. And then when they arrested him and crucified, it was this huge act of injustice that floored me. I mean, I was not reading it, through stained glass windows. It was like reading it for the first time. And I was crushed, how he ended. And then the resurrection was like the catharsis of that was just overwhelming. So that was my first introduction to serious Christianity. And I saw what the gospel was and is. And
how did that lead to you becoming? How did that lead to you becoming an actor, a playwright, and the voice of the Bible? Because I submit to you that probably everybody who's a Christian who's watching right now has heard you with maybe not knowing it's you. But how did all that come about? Yeah,
well, Sharon and I got married. Well, see, I mentioned earlier that I'd already started acting in college, so that was already in my bones. Though I wasn't particularly good at it, I needed to get better, and the way I thought to get better was to go to drama school in London, which I did. Sharon and I got married. We moved to London. She taught at the American school there in London, and I went to drama school and really learned how to use my voice, my body, how to interpret literature and scripts, and see some of the greatest theater I'd ever seen. And of course, because I didn't grow up in the evangelical church, so I didn't get the memo that Christians weren't supposed to be actors. I knew the power of the gospel. I knew the power of storytelling, theater, and art to really inspire and change people's thinking. So a thought entered my mind: how do I combine the two? How do I integrate my work, which is about storytelling and language, with my faith? And so the first thing that emerged was to use the skills and techniques I developed in the theater and apply it to telling the Bible. And so the first time I would tell Bible stories directly from the Gospels, the impact was immediate and profound. There was a time I was on the road 150 days a year, doing 100 events, and that's sort of where I realized that if I really wanted to make an impact and develop this, I needed to build a team, and so that's how Fellowship for Performing Arts started. But I met a lot of these people just touring around doing these events. And the first thing the first thing we did was was record the Bible, and I've recorded the Bible 5 different times. In fact, my last recording, a narration of the Bible, is being used in Chinese-speaking countries to teach English. So if you hear Chinese people with deep, resonant voices articulating every word, you'll know why.
That's right. Now you got Fellowship for Performing Arts. Look at the bottom of the screen, ladies and gentlemen. You see that website right there, fpatheater.com. I encourage you to go there. I also encourage you, look, Max just made a joke about we didn't know Christians should be actors. This is a way to the heart in a way that, say, straight apologetics won't get there, through the arts. And we need more Christians in the arts. If you want to support the work that Max does, you can, because he has to raise money to do this. And that website right there will show you the kind of work he does. It will also give you the opportunity to donate if you want. I just wanted to say that. Yeah, we're a 501c3 too, but if you feel led to give to the arts, I want you to give to Max McLean, because he's doing great work. You've been at Berkeley, not just at Penn. You've been at Duke. You've been at several colleges. In fact, Max, you and me were scheduled to be together at Rutgers on April 1 or April 2, and that got canceled. So we're trying to work together on this. But let's talk about your C.S. Lewis plays for a minute. You've authored many of these. You've starred in them. What are the plays that you've authored about C.S. Lewis, and why did you pick him?
Yeah, it's sort of a long story. You asked a little bit about Fellowship. What we are is a not-for-profit New York City theatrical production company that tells stories with excellence from a Christian worldview, meant to engage a diverse audience. And before the lockdown, we had 3 tours around the country and 1 play in residence in New York City. So we were touring The Great Divorce, which played in Charlotte, your hometown, in January. And then we were in DC for 2 weeks, Houston for 2 weeks, Dallas so a couple of weeks, and then we in New York we had an adaptation of John Milton's Paradise Lost, which was playing for 7 weeks right in the heart at Theater Row. Our adaptation of the Screwtape Letters, C.S. Lewis, the Screwtape Letters, which Newsweek listed among the best plays of 2018, was just about to close its 3rd national tour. I think we were in Colorado Springs before. And then The Most Reluctant Convert, you just saw the video, that had just played to a wonderful, responsive house at Northwestern in Chicago. And then we were going to go to University of Michigan right after that, and then meet you at Rutgers and I was going to do what I do, and you were going to do what you do. And I was looking forward to that. But then everything shut down. So, but we had those 4 plays, and all of that work has one thing in common. They're meant to engage the imagination to the point where it causes people to evaluate their assumptions. Theater is meant to wake people up, in our case, to the reality of God, to his son, Jesus Christ. In that sense, FPA is a ministry, and those who've seen our work can see how that happens. We do our work by selecting the kind of material that can reach a diverse audience. We try to execute to the highest levels that our budgets will allow. And then we ask people to help us do it. In fact, that's why we're called Fellowship for Performing Arts. It's a fellowship of people who believe art and theater from a Christian worldview can capture the imagination and influence culture. And if that's your mission, there's no better person to try to help you articulate that than C.S. Lewis.
And you do it brilliantly. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, you came to Asheville a couple of years ago, and you were doing the Most Reluctant Convert play there. And I thought it was so good that I invited all our major donors to come see this, and then you spoke to them afterwards, which was wonderful. But I'd love to see you go into character for a minute, Max, because there's a wonderful section of that play, Most Reluctant Convert, which you do from memory for like 70 minutes. It's just you on the stage. And I think there's a spot where you have C.S. Lewis responding to a Christian. He's on his road to conversion, but he's not a Christian yet. And I believe you have a quip about Darwinism where you say, I had to say something. Can you go into that section right now? Because that's a brilliant section.
Yeah. Well, this is, Lewis had just come back from the war. He had dabbled in the occult. He considered himself an atheist. He said, Either there's no God behind the universe, a God indifferent to good and evil, or worse, an evil God. Those were the assumptions he had. And he came to that conclusion primarily because he lost his mother to cancer when he was 8 years old, and she was the light of his life. He had a terrible relationship with his father. He saw the butchery of the trenches in World War I, and he thought, obviously, God doesn't care. If there's a God, he doesn't care. And so that was the position he started from. And then he was slowly being sort of chipped away. And one of the ways it was chipped away was this conversation with his very close friend. And I'll go ahead and go into that conversation. Then one day, my very dear friend, Owen Barfield, who satisfied my hunger for debate and rational opposition, announced that he had changed his views. He was no longer a materialist, but had become a theist. I was shocked. I thought Barfield was safe. He came from such a free-thinking family that he barely even heard of Christianity. Barfield brought up all the abominations: God, spirit, afterlife. Damn it, Owen, it's medieval. This started our great war, a philosophic disputation that lasted for years. Barfield asked me, "Do you believe that logic and reason brings forth indisputable truth?" "I do." "Are your moral and aesthetic judgments valid, meaningful?" "They are." "Then materialism must be abandoned," Barfield said. "There is a hopeless discord between what our minds claim to be and what it really must be. If materialism is true, we claim our minds to be reason, perceiving universal intellectual principles, moral laws, possessing free will. But if materialism is true, our minds must in reality be merely chance arrangements of atoms in skulls. I argued that we are to accept reality as it is revealed to us by our senses. And the finders of science have concluded that human reason is merely cognitive maps resulting from natural selection with random mutations over millions of years to confer on humans a reproductive advantage over other species. I had to say something. I'd been defending materialism for years. Barfield answered, "If my clearest reasoning tells me that my mind is nothing more than the accidental results of atoms colliding in skulls, there must be some mistake. How shall I trust my mind when it tells me that my most profound thought is merely a mental pattern resulting from heredity and physics?" That's what turned Lewis around from his atheism. From that point, that led to a kind of a theistic paganism, kind of not believing in a monotheistic God, but sort of believing in a God of the philosophers. But that was the first step to moving him towards belief in Christ.
It's one of the most brilliant insights, Max, and I love the way you perform that. And for those who are just tuning in, this is Max McLean. By the way, the play, The Most Reluctant Convert, you can get in DVD. And right now, that's the only way you're going to see it because Max, like the rest of us, is sequestered.
Yeah, we've had to cancel 27 events in the last. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
If this comes to your, by the way, here's how you know it's going to come to your area. It's not just this play. There's The Great Divorce. There's The Screw Tape Letters. There's Paradise Lost, and a few others. What you need to do is go to fpatheater.com and get on their mailing list. And so when Max or one of his groups, one of his acting groups is coming to town, you will get an email and an opportunity to get tickets. And you want to get tickets quickly. If you wait, it will be sold out. Trust me, I did that once, and the only way to get tickets was to call Max himself. So you've got to sign up, so you'll be the first to get a notification that he's coming to town, or one of his team groups, acting groups, is coming to town. But Max, we're in a pandemic, as everyone knows, and of course, Lewis is famous for writing on evil and suffering. In fact, you said that was one of the things that kept him out of the kingdom initially. And he talks about this in Mere Christianity, the problem of pain, a grief observed. What would be some of your favorite insights, if you want to share any from those sources? Maybe Mere Christianity we can start with. What do you think?
Well, I was just trying to think what I was thinking about this essay that Lewis wrote in 1948 that I believe is an essay on the coronavirus.
Right, I've seen that. Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah, it's actually called Living in an Atomic Age, but if you just replace atomic bomb with virus, it works all the same. So I'm going to just try that, and you tell me if it works, okay? This is just a little piece of, it's about a 20-minute essay. I'm going to read about 2 minutes of it.
All right.
It says, in one way, we think a great deal too much of the coronavirus. How are we to live in a deadly pandemic? I am tempted to reply, why, as you would have lived in the 16th century when the plague visited London almost every year, or as you would have lived in the Viking Age when raiders from Scandinavia might land and cut your throat any night, or indeed as you already live in an age of cancer, an age of syphilis, an age of paralysis, an age of air raids, an age of motor accidents. In other words, do not let us begin by exaggerating the novelty of our situation. Believe me, dear sir or madam, you and all you love were already sentenced to death before the virus arrived. And quite a high percentage of us are going to die in unpleasant ways. We had indeed one very great advantage over our ancestors, anesthetics, but we have that still. It is perfectly ridiculous to go about whimpering and drawing long faces because the scientists have added one more chance of painful premature death to a world which already bristled with such chances, and in which death itself was not a chance, but an absolute certainty. This is the first point to be made. And the first action to be taken is to pull ourselves together. If we're all going to be destroyed by a virus, let that virus, when it comes, find us doing sensible human things. Praying, working, teaching, reading, listening to music, bathing the children, playing tennis, chatting to our friends over a pint and a game of darts, not huddled together like frightened sheep and thinking about viruses. They may break our bones, they may break our bodies, a microbe can do that, but they need not dominate our minds.
Bravo, C.S. Lewis. That was C.S. Lewis, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, Max McLean reading a section of an essay from C.S. Lewis way back in 1948. And I have people on the feed right now saying, wow, Max, you ought to record that. Well, he just did. This is going to be on the internet now. And this is the kind of quality that Max brings when he does a play, whether it's The Most Reluctant Convert, or whether it's Screw Tape, or whether it's The Great Divorce. Either he is playing in these plays directly, or he has a team of actors that join him or do it independent of him. And it's all through the Fellowship for Performing Arts, fpatheater.com. And as I say, you can, how many of these are on DVD, Max? I know Most Reluctant Convert is. Are there others?
I think that's, we have my 2009 performance of Mark's Gospel is on DVD, and I think there's an earlier version of the Book of Genesis on DVD. All of those are available via Amazon Prime if you have that.
Everybody has it now. Able to eat, Max, of course. we wouldn't, especially you in New York City. You must think you're in complete, alien world over there. I mean, you walk in the streets and there's nobody out there but you. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's but there's people are beginning to the natives are restless.
Yes,
I am seeing more and more people that are. Yeah, I am seeing more and more people.
Hey,
but go ahead.
Ask you one other thing about. And there's so many books we could talk about. We obviously don't have time to go into all of them, but you and I were speaking a couple of weeks ago about the introduction to the problem of pain. And I went back and read it because you really inspired me to do so. And there is such a great, there's great insights in all of Lewis's works, but can you kind of unpack the general insight from the introduction to the problem of pain, Max?
Well, I'm working on a new play, and the play that you were referencing is The Most Reluctant Convert, which is the journey to faith in Christ. And in many conversion stories, that's the end of the story. But in Lewis's case, and it really should be the beginning of the story. Mm-hmm. And in Lewis's case, how did he become this hard-boiled atheist to becoming one of the most influential Christian writers of the 20th century? And it was really through, that's what this next play is about, and it is, a lot of it is referencing the problem of pain. And I was just working on some of that text in the last couple of days. Let me see how much of that I can. Let me look for it and see how much of that is available. Okay, well, this is very interesting. There's just so much good stuff at Lewis. It's almost hard to pick it up.
We got time, Max. If it takes 10 minutes, just do it.
Okay. All right. Well, here this is. Let me go with this. He said, this is how Lewis unpacks the rise of Christianity. So, in all developed religions, we find three strands. And in Christianity, one more. The first is this: early man, living in perilous solitude, experienced something called the numinous. Now, those who do not know this term may be introduced to it by supposing you were told there is a hungry tiger in the next room, and you believed it. It would arouse involuntary fear. You would know that you were in danger and run for your life if you could. But if you were told that there's a ghost in the next room and believed it, you would feel a different sort of fear, not danger, for no one is primarily afraid of what a ghost may do to them, but for the simple fact that it is a ghost. There would be an uncanny fear, akin to dread. Now suppose that you were told there is a mighty spirit in the room and believed it. The disturbance would be profound, a sense of inadequacy, a certain shrinking, which might be expressed in Shakespeare's words, "Under it my genius is rebuked." This feeling is described as awe. Here, we are at the border of the numinous. We do not know how far back this feeling goes, though it is probably as old as humanity itself, but our concern is not with dates. The important thing is that it is widespread and does not disappear with the growth of civilization. Oh, it may seem natural to you that early man, being surrounded by real danger, should invent the numinous, but the numinous is not contained in any anticipation of injury or death. It is a sheer jump, an apprehension of something that does not come from the physical world. Anthropologists may say that this comes from fear of the dead, not explaining why the dead, the least dangerous of all men, should excite this peculiar fear. Awe and dread are an interpretation we give to the universe, an impression received from it. There seems to be only two views that we can hold about this awe. Either it is a mere twist in the mind, serving no biological function, yet showing no tendency to disappear and finding its fullest development among poets, philosophers, saints, or else it is a direct experience of the really supernatural, to which the name revelation might be given. The second strand in religion is the universal experience we call I ought or I ought not. Morality, like numinous awe, is a jump. It cannot be deduced from its environment. And it has one characteristic too extraordinary to ignore. All moralities that history has acknowledged agree on a behavior which they fail to practice. All men alike stand condemned not by alien codes of ethics, but by our own. And they are conscious of guilt. So this second strand in religion has a moral law that is both approved and disobeyed. This is not an inference from experience, but either inexplicable illusion or else revelation. The third stage in religious development arises when humanity identifies the numinous power to which they dread with the moral law to which they feel obligation. Of all the jumps that humanity takes, this is certainly the most surprising. To unite the numinous that haunts with the morality that demands. One is wasteful, ruthless, unjust, the other quite the opposite. This cannot be wish fulfillment, for it fulfills no one's wishes. Who wishes to see the naked authority of the moral law armed with the dreadful fear of the numinous? Only a single people took this step completely, though great individuals have taken it also, and judged by its fruits, this step, taken seriously only by the Jews, is a step towards health. It may be madness or illusion, or it may be revelation. If revelation, then truly it is through Abraham that all people on earth shall be blessed. For it was the Jews who fully identified the awful presence atop Mount Sinai with the thundercloud of the righteous Lord who loveth righteousness. The final strand, unique to Christianity, is a historical event. There was a man born among these Jews who claimed to be the son of that which is both the giver of the moral law and the awful presence atop Sinai. The claim is so shocking that we take it too lightly. only two views of this man are possible. Either he was a raving lunatic of an unusually abominable type, or else he was and is precisely what he said. There is no middle way. And if the historical records make the first hypothesis unacceptable, you must submit to the second. And if we do that, all else that is claimed by Christians becomes credible, that this man, having been killed, is yet alive, and that his death in some manner incomprehensible to human thought has affected a real change in our relations to the awful and righteous Lord, a change in our favor. I'll stop there.
Well done, brother. That's for those of you wondering the source, I see people on the feed here saying that's mere Christianity. No, that's the problem of pain adapted by Max McLean for theatrical use here. And Max, just comment on that before we go to questions from our viewing audience. That fourth strand that is unique to Christianity, when do you think Lewis came to that conclusion? And you know how he just makes things so clear when he gives you the big picture from 10,000 feet, and then he zeroes in on Christianity to say this is what's unique about Christianity. When did he make that jump to number four, I should say?
Well, in his own life, it would have been, he had what I read earlier, the Barfield moment, was the reality that atheism means you have to disassociate. You have to almost take your eyeball out of your eyeball to look at your eyes. Reason becomes the product of chance. So there's no specific source of knowledge. None. It's just so he realized that, and his epistemology made him go to some sort of theism. And then it was really his conversation with Tolkien. Lewis was a medievalist, so was Tolkien. So they understand the power of story, the power of myth, and that insight that I just read tends to use that. Right. And so after he became a theist, Lewis said, well, I've come to believe in God, but not Christianity. I simply cannot understand how the life and death of someone else, whoever he was, could have anything to do with me here and now. And Tollers asked him, he said, Tollers said to him, and I'm trying to recollect this in my head, whenever you meet a god in a pagan story, sacrificing himself in a pagan story, because all these pagan myths have rising and dying gods, Osiris, Balder, Dionysus, even a fairy tale, you like it very much and are mysteriously moved by it, provided you meet it anywhere except in the Gospels. And he says, Jack, the story of Christ is a myth, working on us in the same way as other myths, with one tremendous difference. It really happened. And that conversation made him read the Bible differently, because before he thought of it as a prescriptive book, and he had all these Sunday school associations with it, and he couldn't get through to it. And all of a sudden that peeled the layer off, and he could see Christ in a very similar way as I tried to explain when I read John's Gospel that one time.
Well, let's take some questions, because we've got questions from our viewing audience. And if you'd like to ask a question of Max McLean, type the word question in big block letters in front, then in complete English and succinct English, ask your questions. We'll try and get to them. The great Jorge Gill will come on now and feed you some questions. Max, here he comes.
Hello, gentlemen, and thanks everybody that are watching on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter app, and the website. Max, thank you for that. I enjoyed myself listening to you. What a fantastic interview. Now I have a question for you. Diego asks, what do you think is needed for Christians to be at the highest in the world of the media and arts production? What is your forecast for this?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Repeat it, please.
The question would be summarized: how can we as Christians get better at getting in the mainstream media of the arts?
Oh, I think the door is closed. And in a certain sense, we have to open a new door. There's a there's something related to, I'm going to see if I can find it. Christianity believes in truth with a capital T. And in 2016, Oxford Dictionary's word of the year was post-truth, right? That's really important. It's the definition is objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to the emotion and personal beliefs. Speak my truth. My truth becomes my reality. C.S. Lewis calls this poison. And that's, of course, what the world is giving. And I want to read a little something. It's this, that it's like taking your eyeballs out and looking at it. He assumes that that given morality is perceived, and this is what Christianity, there's the moral law, there's the God, there's the awesome numinous, and then there's the moral law. And the culture does not want to subscribe to a moral law. And so they have this poison of subjectivism that anytime it gets met with Christianity, it just gets Christianity gets shoved aside, don't want to hear it. So we have to we have to create our own platforms, and we have to do it with the highest levels of excellence just to get a fair hearing. Just to get a fair hearing. So that I'm not sure that's the answer, but I think if you're looking to get besides comfort, one of the things I noticed on Easter Sunday during this pandemic was this message, because all the churches were closed and everybody had to go. It says, and the media was commenting that the churches are needed for comfort. That's the role of the churches, is for comfort. But salvation is going to come from science.
Yeah,
that's the message that's going out right now.
It's interesting, Max. There are some Christians who have a lot of money, like Mark Burnett, who produced the entire Bible series. Yeah. And NBC or whoever put that on will go, hey, we'll put that on because we know people will watch it and we'll get big advertising revenues for it. But it seems to me that the major media will allow that as long as you say it's a story. They won't allow you to come on and try and say that it's true. And here's the evidence for it. Yeah. That's kind of what you're doing, though. You're kind of taking that middle road where you are saying to people, you really ought to consider this as true, and it's something you really ought to think about, and it's very effective, the kind of work you're doing.
Yeah. There was I was interviewed by the Northwestern University newspaper, and they asked me this question right before I did the show. Yeah, it says, why should Northwestern students care about C.S. Lewis or be interested in your show? That was the question. And I remember answering it, well, nearly anyone who has embraced Christianity as an adult has been influenced by what seemed to them to be the probability of God's existence accompanied by something like a religious experience. So the intellectual assent converts religious experience from something strange, in an academic world, to something desired. And I think that's what's, I don't think intellectual arguments lead to conversion. They remove the inhibition that was preventing a move from skepticism to belief. And I think that happens, particularly in the college years, one way or the other during the university years. So it's an opportunity. I think we need to be there. And I think we need both. And what we do, theater is there's such vitality in theater. There's an energy in theater, and quite frankly, there's very little theater going on campuses these days, other than the drama department. It's not for everybody. It's very rare that a theatrical production will go to a college campus these days. A lot of the part of it is because theater is so provocative, and the political the PC culture has made it too dangerous, for anybody to kind of say anything these days.
Right.
So it's really, but when it's there, it gets a lot of attention. So I think that the vitality of theater, the fact that it's rare, and of course Lewis being somebody that's respected, these are some of the things that we've used to build a platform to get on campus.
Well, our plan together was you have a broader platform in the sense that you're going to attract people to a play. And then our plan was the next night we would invite them to more of the straightforward evidence as to why Christianity is true. And we were going to do that at Rutgers until coronavirus hit. So we'll try it again next year if we can. But let's go to more questions, Jorge.
Got this one. He says, any testimonies that you remember from someone who was very shocked because, after they went to your play and they admitted to you that they are unbelievers, but now they're starting to question their atheism?
Yes. We're sort of a pre-evangelism position. We do not make the come to Jesus appeal, but I think we prepare the way for the come to Jesus appeal. And quite a few people have really been stirred. The Holy Spirit begins to stir, and they tell us that. And as a result of that, and we hear later that was a major step or a pivotal step in coming to faith in Christ. And we hear that, from time to time. It's not, as I say, we it's not evangelism. It's pre-evangelism. Yeah.
Great. Got Scott ask, how would you recommend implementing Christianity to the arts? Because I'm planning on doing that myself.
It's a very competitive field. The bar is super, super high to get a hearing. So really work on your craft. And as you work on your craft, guard your heart. Because, man, I see so much negotiation when people get into that world. They negotiate so much away. So you really need the fellowship. You really need to guard your heart.
Okay, we got room for a couple of more before we finish here. So I'm going to ask you, Linda says, my first exposure to Lewis was the Narnia series. It was yours. What was yours, Max? And what are your thoughts on Lewis's children's books?
I love Lewis's children's books. What he ended up doing was he took the same thoughts that I shared, some of and how dense they are, and I try to mitigate that in terms of thinning it out a little bit to make it compelling to a theatrical audience. What he did similar things. He took the same thoughts, but he limited his vocabulary. so that they would appeal to children, but he would get very deep Christian thought into the hearts and minds of young people as well as their parents, unbeknownst to them. And so, in many times, their hearts were kindled early, even though they had no idea what it was. And the appeal of those stories are just so they're eternal.
Fantastic. Last question, Max. What is the hardest role you play from C.S. Lewis character, and what is your personal favorite to perform?
Well, Screw Tape was very challenging, and you had to get yourself into a headspace. It's satire, and seeing, he creates this morally inverted universe where up is down, good is bad, God is called the enemy. But in order to do that, so that we can see, we must not be ignorant of the devil's devices. And it's a brilliant piece, and many people, probably more people, have become Christians through that piece than any other piece we've done, interestingly enough, because it reveals the dark hold that Satan has on people. I love doing the most reluctant convert. I love being that smart for 80 minutes. It's just, I just love thinking his thoughts after him. They just refresh me and cleanse me and grow me in a way that nobody else does.
Wow.
Well, Max, this is a show about hope, and you've provided a lot of hope today, not only through C.S. Lewis, but just by the fact that you are out there and you have a whole team of people behind you who are bringing very highly excellent arts to people from a Christian perspective. And that's so important in today's world. But before we go, I've got to ask you the final question, because it's a show about hope. Where did Lewis place his hope, and where should we?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Lewis was once asked, which religion of the world gives its followers the greatest happiness? He was asked that question. And his answer was, while it lasts, the religion of worshiping oneself is the best.
Right. While it lasts.
Yeah, and he said, I didn't go, I was not a Christian. I didn't go to religion to make me happy. I always knew that a bottle of port would do that. Mm-hmm. If you want religion to make you feel really comfortable, I wouldn't recommend Christianity, because the reason is that Christianity tells us we are sinners. We've broken the moral law, that we need healing. That's the hope, is that and our contemporary world, and this is part of several other questions that have been asked, is trying to convince us that there's nothing wrong with us, that we don't need to be saved. And that's why it makes it very difficult. The early Christians, they assumed their hearers understood what sin was, and they had a sense of guilt. Like everybody, Jews and pagans had different ways to relieve guilt, some sort of works-based sacrificial system. But when the early preachers of the gospel brought the message of hope through Christ, that their sins are forgiven, that they're loved through this sacrificial death, that he who knew no sin became sin for us. That was good news, because they knew they were sick and they needed a doctor, and the doctor was there, and he had the right cure, the right remedy. And that's what Christianity is. Our challenge today is we have to convince the world of the diagnosis before they will welcome the cure. And that's one of the reasons why theater, the work that Frank does, the work that I do, I think a lot of religious conversion experience assumes too much too fast, and we have to make sure that they understand they're sick, because Christianity has nothing to say to anyone if you feel like you don't need forgiveness.
Well said. Yeah. And that's what our friend Ray Comfort said when we had him on a few weeks ago, that people need to know they have a disease before they're interested in the cure. Max, I want to thank you for doing this show, but more importantly, for doing what you're doing around the country, even around the world. And I want to encourage people right now to go to fpatheater.com. You see it at the bottom of your screen. If you can donate, great. Even if you can't donate, go there and put your email address into their system so you will know when Max or his team comes to your locale. Man, what a great place to bring friends who are on the fence, who are unbelievers. You go to see Most Reluctant Convert, they're going to be entertained, and they're also going to have a big stone put in their shoe about their worldview. So, Max, thanks for all you're doing. And it's just a wonderful program. It's a wonderful ministry that you have.
So good to be on your program, Frank. Thanks for having me.
All right, folks. Next week, Jay Warner Wallace, Sean McDowell, Michael Heiser, and many others. Be here on Hope One. See you then.
11:30 a.m. Eastern. Ciao, ciao.